Good afternoon, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and here is your latest forecast update on the rainfall that's occurring across southeast and south central Queensland at this time. Intense rainfall is making itself very much felt across southeast Queensland, with 24-hour totals now approaching 350 millimetres into the Brisbane metro area, with a lot more rainfall still to come, and the flooding situation is now beginning to unfold as a very serious threat across southeast Queensland. All of the details plus a brief outlook on what rainfall is still expected to come across this rainfall event upcoming in today's forecast update. If you are brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing, but let's get stuck straight into things this afternoon with a look at the remnants of ex-tropical cyclone Alfred, which are now moving inland over Chinchilla and out towards Miles, where we've got plenty of rainfall streaming into the centre of the system here, with a low pressure core, like I said, well out inland now outside of Chinchilla. But look at how much rainfall is just streaming around on the eastern side of the system here, down the Sunshine Coast, so as far north as Hervey Bay, then right down the Sunshine Coast, now all coinciding down in what looks to be a bit of a rainfall highway developing across Moreton Island and North Stradbroke Island, where intense rainfall has been felt right throughout the night. Now, plenty more rainfall is still to come, but another associated risk factor with this rainfall streaming in is the fact that there's still near tropical cyclone force winds in this rainfall event here, and that's a comment that I've been seeing quite a lot, is the fact that it is still really windy around the Moreton Bay area. There's some strong wind gusts there, averaging 70 to 80 kilometres an hour, with peak wind gusts overnight up to 110 kilometres an hour around parts of the Moreton Bay area, so it certainly feels like a tropical cyclone is moving through. But again, the remnants of Alfred now much weaker, and the rainfall is of course now the main threat, and those winds now finally beginning to die off. But again, if we pause the radar frame here on one of the latest frames, you can see just how much rainfall is streaming ashore. A massive swathe of very heavy rainfall through here. We're talking about 20 to 30 millimetres an hour. In fact, it is a little bit heavier in some of these spots here. We're looking at rainfall accumulations up to about 70 millimetres an hour for brief periods of time. So again, this is locally intense rainfall now developing across this part of southeast Queensland, and is causing some significant problems in terms of flooding. Already, a lot of rivers around the southeast corner of Queensland, including ones that flow into the Brisbane, the Bremer, the Nerang and the Coomera rivers, and also the Logan River as well, at moderate flooding alerts and rising rapidly as well. And major flooding is expected to occur through the Brisbane and the Bremer rivers throughout the remainder of today, and major flooding is also possible in the Logan River, and I'll get to the flood forecast in just a few moments. You can also see plenty of rainfall up on the northern parts of the Sunshine Coast as well. Hervey Bay has picked up over 300 millimetres in the last 24 hours, with a lot more rainfall still to come. Just a stagnant line of thunderstorms south of Bundaberg through here. So anywhere between Bundaberg right down to Rainbow Beach, including Hervey Bay, and some locations along the coastline here are just getting smashed with stagnant heavy rainfall. And this rainfall is not going anywhere anytime soon as well. So the rainfall is going to be very heavy in those locations and expected to cause some significant flash flooding across these areas as well. Bundaberg at a risk of flash flooding, but it looks like they might just be a little bit too far north to receive the significant top end of these thunderstorms, which I guess is very good news for them, because they don't want to be receiving this rainfall, even though, again, Bundaberg parched for moisture at this time. But as you can see over the last hour, these thunderstorms really slow moving, and it looks like they are sliding south of the Bundaberg area down towards Hervey Bay. Still, though, the chance of showers here and there through the Bundaberg area throughout this afternoon and evening. Again, just so much rainfall in this part of Queensland right now, and it is expected from this tropical cyclone's remnants. We knew they were going to be a wet side to this tropical cyclone, and certainly Alfred's dirty secret is the rainfall on the backside of this system here. What we have started to see developing on the radar imagery, and what's very much expected to become apparent over the next couple of hours, is a bit of a rainfall highway between Moreton Island and North Stradbroke Island, which will be funneled straight in towards Redland City, especially into the southern side of Redland City, and then down towards Logan City as well. Expecting some huge rainfall accumulations in these areas, especially through the Venman Bushland National Park. Expecting some massive rainfall accumulations in the more rural areas outside of Logan City here towards the east side of the M1. Plenty of rainfall expected in these areas as well, and massive contributions expected to both the Albert and the Logan rivers as well, and some significant contributions rather expected for the Oxley Creek too, which is also expected to get up towards major flooding alerts. So this rainfall highway here, let's see what the forecast is suggesting, and keep in mind that this has been flowing for the last couple of hours as well. So I've picked the pointer here for the peak amount of rainfall accumulations here between Logan City and Redland City, and we're talking about 3 hourly rainfall accumulations up to about 100 millimetres, which is in line with what the radar is suggesting right now. And as we push this forecast forward, the rainfall not only gets heavier, but it becomes a little bit more widespread, heading a little bit further north out towards the Brisbane City area. And keep in mind, we're now at 6 o'clock tonight, and the rainfall has not moved, and it has not eased off in the slightest, with still heavy rainfall expected into the Brisbane area, and then heading slowly towards the northwest down to the mountains outside of the Wivenhoe Dam through later on tonight, and still moderate heavy rainfall expected later on tonight to the Brisbane City area. It will finally ease off by very early tomorrow morning for both Redlands and Logan City, and then slowly easing off through later tomorrow morning for Brisbane, and then a little bit later on from that out towards Ipswich and Gatton, the last locations to be receiving significant rainfall before the showers and storms pretty much clear out by tomorrow afternoon. So again, showers showers, storms, and locally heavy rainfall expected to occur throughout the remainder of today. And this rainfall highway, like I said, coming into full fruition now in the forecast. And what a lot of people don't realise is that the rainfall often takes a very different pattern to what the wind speeds are doing, especially when we're talking about a tropical low here. So even though it might look like this rainfall is sliding, it is being dragged along by tropical cyclone Alfred. And you can think of this having a gravitational pull, effectively speaking, as Alfred heads further inland. Even though this rainfall is heading down towards the south, the significant stuff over here, which is offshore, which looks like it is going to be sliding down past Stradbroke Island, is going to be drawn inland as well. And that's why we're expecting that rainfall highway, and that's why we're expecting that very slow westerly movement over the Brisbane city area by later on tonight. And that's a very important factor to understand here. And for people that don't really understand how storms move or how rain patterns move, especially in tropical cyclones, which I don't blame you if you don't understand, they're very rare phenomena down in southeast Queensland, and certainly not relevant to the average person down in southeast Queensland, that's for sure. But it's just best to be trusting the forecast at this time, even though the forecast can get it wrong every now and then, and especially with tropical cyclone Alfred, the wind forecast was overestimated across a wide swathe of Brisbane. But in the sense of the rainfall forecast, it's much better to err on the side of caution than to be doubting it and thinking that, oh yeah, this rainfall is going to slide, when in actual fact it really isn't here, and this rainfall will be ending up over the parts of southeast Queensland that really don't need any more rainfall. Don't panic though. A lot of these locations are built for rainfall events like this, and even though we're talking about a further 300 or 400 millimetres on top of the rainfall that has already fallen, which in a lot of locations is 300 or 400 millimetres as well, which could be leading to 48 hourly rainfall accumulations up to 700 or even 800 millimetres here, which you can see on the forecast models is a really significant amount, and also quite a plausible forecast now, even though it has been back down slightly from this morning. These locations are still built for this type of rainfall. A lot of these homes are elevated far enough above creek levels as to where major flooding will still be a problem, but it's not expected to wipe out homes and properties and take lives. It's certainly a time to remain very, very vigilant as well. And if there are evacuation orders put in place for your house, considering that we're not under a full-blown tropical cyclone warning right now, and tropical cyclone conditions are very much easing off across southeast Queensland, it will be safe to evacuate, provided you can get out quickly and efficiently and effectively as well, and get yourself towards higher ground. Again, I strongly doubt evacuation orders will be put into place, but it's certainly a thing to keep in the back of your head. Just if you do get put under an evacuation notice, get out of there as soon as possible. Don't think of stuff to grab, just get you and your family out of there in a cool, calm and collected manner. They're more often than not, those evacuation orders are sent out as a precaution. They just don't want people's lives to be messed up in this kind of stuff, especially with the amount of rainfall that's going to lead to the floodwaters. They do it as a precaution to save lives, and more often than not, they are extremely overkill. But on the 1 out of 10 times where they're not actually overkill, it's very good to be evacuated, as opposed to staying and waiting through the swathe and the path of this massive rainfall dump that's expected to continue. So again, throughout the remainder of today, really significant rainfall accumulations are expected, and the rainfall not easing off until about midnight tonight around the Redland City and the Logan City area. Significantly speaking, of course, the rainfall will drop in intensity later on this afternoon, but in terms of how much rainfall is coming through, it's not going to start coming off until at least midnight tonight. We're seeing a further 500 millimetres by the looks of things across some of these locations, especially into the Venman, Bushmans National Park. Some pretty significant rainfall accumulations can be expected in those areas there. They're a little bit hillier, and then out towards Logan City as well, rainfall accumulations between 250 and 450 millimetres over the next 12 hours can also be expected. The Brisbane City area, and especially the suburbs just directly south of Brisbane City, expecting rainfall accumulations between 150 and 300 millimetres on top of what has already occurred, with the heaviest falls coming through later this afternoon and into early this evening. You can see on the radar imagery now, really starting to pick up across parts of Brisbane, but it's going to be when this stuff gets itself dragged ashore here into the Brisbane City area where the rainfall will really pick up once again, and we'll be seeing some really significant falls as a result in the Brisbane City area. Rainfall rates also expected to be quite high into early tomorrow morning as well over the Brisbane City area, and they'll be especially high as you get further inland out towards the Ivanhoe Dam and the mountains adjacent to Ivanhoe Dam. We'll be likely seeing further accumulations. They're up to about 400 millimetres on top of what has already fallen. These will extend as far north as about Gympie as well, with heavy falls, like I said, as far north as about Gympie. Rainfall accumulations up there could be as high as 100 millimetres further north, but once you get down outside of the Ivanhoe Dam area, especially out around the Mount Mee and Woodford sort of area, some really significant rainfall accumulations are possible. And then inland from Roochdore is when they do begin to drop off, but still a couple of 100 millimetres expected in these areas, with, like I said, the heaviest falls being later on tonight and into very early tomorrow morning. Further inland out towards Ipswich and Marburg, the heaviest rainfall is starting about now, but it won't really pick up until what we're expecting to be the proper heavy rainfall until later on tonight. And like I said at the start of the video, the rainfall not easing off in these areas until later tomorrow morning. Rainfall is also expected to be heavy at times around Toowoomba, especially into the foothills along the eastern side of the city. We'll be seeing rainfall accumulations through the Mount Lofty and Table hilltop mountain areas, up to about 300 or 400 millimetres on top of what has already fallen. Then into the town centre and some of the eastern suburbs, rainfall accumulations could be as high as 200 millimetres through there. The western suburbs of Toowoomba not expecting too much in the way of significant rainfall. Heavy falls expected down to the mountains that feed the Bremer River, and I believe the Oxley Creek as well further down here is outside of Thornton, and then just across the mountains from Killarney and Warwick we'll be seeing some very heavy falls down here, and you can see the forecast model suggesting a further 450 millimetres or so on top of what has already fallen. So expect some significant flash flooding in this area. About an hour's drive southwest of Ipswich, some really significant falls outside of Boona can be expected right down towards the Queensland and New South Wales border. In terms of the rainfalls for New South Wales, you can see the rain rates beginning to drop off now for everywhere apart from Tweed Heads and Coolangatta. The rainfall's still relatively heavy through there, coinciding with some pretty strong winds as well, but those winds now really starting to drop off, and it looks like the rainfall as well is now really beginning to drop off across the immediate northeastern corner of New South Wales. Rainfall's still heavy outside of Dorrigo and Coffs Harbour. Again, these kind of act like a bit of a strong fist that just rinses the clouds dry from all of the rainfall through here and just gets all of the water out of them. So again, Coffs Harbour and that kind of rainbow effect that we see in this sort of area really going to work right now with some significant falls occurring through there. And we've had rainfall accumulations over the last couple of days up to about 700 millimetres in these areas. Certainly an area that gets overlooked when we see significant rainfall across southeast Queensland just because of its exposed location and how much moisture can get dragged in on the backside of these low pressure systems. So again, we will be watching the Coffs Harbour river levels quite closely. And just before I get on to the flood risks and warnings from this system here, you can see as we zoom out the remnants of ex-tropical cyclone Alfred, very, very large indeed, with the centre of the storm over Chinchilla and Miles at this point and being dragged slowly towards the west with a huge amount of convection and cloud activity still to come for southeast Queensland, offshore from the southeast Queensland coastline, and this is where the bulk of the rainfall is. If I had to put an exact number on what percentage of the rainfall is still to come in terms of Brisbane, I'd say about halfway for a number. Again, the rainfall is going to get quite heavy tonight, so there will still be quite a lot of rainfall, but whatever you've had in the last 3 or 4 days around the Brisbane city area, double it, and that's probably what you're going to end up in terms of how much rainfall you're expecting tonight. For the Redland city area, I reckon they've had about 40% of the total accumulations over the last couple of days compared to what they expected to receive here, and then further inland out towards Ivanhoe Dam, they've only had about 20% of the total accumulations from Tropical Cyclone Alfred, so that means that 80% of the rainfall is still to come in those areas here. Of course, they're just very rough guesstimates that I'm putting out right now. They're not official as well, by the way, but these are just rough guesstimates based off what I'm seeing on the radar imagery right now and what I'm seeing on the forecast models as well. So interesting stuff, and certainly something to keep in the back of your head, but don't bet the farm on them happening, and again, don't make preparations based off them as well. Now, flooding is expected to be very widespread. We're already seeing some really significant flooding up around the Bundaberg area and the Harvey Bay area. Of course, they've had 300 millimetres in basically the last 5 hours over there. That was a nasty storm that headed over Harvey Bay, that's for sure, and some significant falls also expected south of Gympie inland from Maroochydore, so we'll likely be seeing some minor to moderate flooding through Kenilworth as well, through I believe it's the Obi Creek through here, flowing down the Obi Creek and then into the Maroochy River as well. Some significant rainfall can also be expected in those areas, and then further south feeding into the Ivanhoe Dam, I'm not 100% sure, it is the Stanley River again. The Stanley River expecting some significant contributions as well that will feed into the Ivanhoe Dam and then down the Brisbane River. Some really significant rainfall can be expected in these areas, which will lead to major flooding and tributaries flowing straight into the Ivanhoe Dam as well. Down the Brisbane River, considering they've got the Ivanhoe Dam to, kind of curb the amount of rainfall and the flooding ramifications that they can see there, I'm not expecting anything absolutely wild in the way of monster flooding around the Brisbane River, but I'm still expecting moderate to major flooding upstream around the Ivanhoe Dam area, and then past Ipswich, the Brisbane River will start to calm down a little bit. We'll likely only be seeing minor to moderate flooding. Again, minor flooding, generally speaking, is no problem for locations around the Brisbane River. It happens every now and then, especially on highest astronomical tides. You can get backups of the water up and around the Brisbane area, right up towards Ipswich even. So again, significant rainfall accumulations there won't cause too much problems. You probably need about 1,000 millimetres in a very short period of time in some saturated conditions as well, mind you. And keep in mind, southeast Queensland before Cyclone Alfred was by no means saturated, that's for sure, to cause some monster flooding. And by no means is this going to be as bad as 2011. But in terms of the raw numbers that we're seeing right now, it could certainly contribute to a significant flooding event with minor to moderate riverine flooding conditions expected expected, and pushing moderate to major as you get further upstream. The Bremer River, however, is a much different story, especially considering Ipswich's very flood-prone location and positioning here. I am expecting some significant flooding of the Bremer River, which will get up towards a moderate, even up towards the major flooding alerts through Ipswich and all of its tributary rivers as well, through the Wirral Creek and then some of the mountains, or some of the creeks that flow off the mountains through here south of Ipswich, including the Oxley Creek. I'm expecting some major flooding in those creeks as well, so expect some significant rises and jumps in the water levels, especially later on tonight. However, for Ipswich, for the most part, unless you've been put under an evacuation notice, you should be more or less okay. If you flood on rainfall accumulations more than 500 millimeters, I'd recommend throughout the rest of this afternoon getting out to a safer location, a higher ground as well, especially if you live within 100 meters of a water body. And I also recommend, if you haven't already, to get some sandbags ready and to just make some final preparations to get yourself ready around the Ipswich area for some major flooding that could eventuate later on tonight. But keep in mind, major flooding, even though it is the worst kind of level of flooding that the Bureau of Meteorology issues, and can cause some really significant problems. For the most part, these places in Queensland are built for floods, and they're built for 1,000 millimetres in 7 days. So unless the conditions have changed dramatically since 2011, you'd hope that they haven't, considering that you'd hope that they've learned their lesson from that flooding event down there. But again, I really don't foresee the chance of there being some massive floods around the Ipswich and the Brisbane area. I reckon it is going to be a little bit calmer than what some of the news agencies and what some of the forecasts are also spitting at this time. That's not to take away from the magnitude of this event here, and I am still expecting some really significant flooding, and I don't want people to get complacent at me saying that I think that it is being blown out of the water by some of the media outlets. But at this point, it is imperative to stay calm, and if it is flooded, remember to forget it. That's for sure. Well, forget what is flooded, but remember to forget what is flooded, because there's no point in rescuing things in floodwaters. You'll just you'll just become a statistic of the tropical cyclone and make yourself a rescue that the SES has to complete. Again, significant flooding expected down into the Oxley Creek, I've already mentioned that, and then down in towards the Logan River as well, flowing through Logan City. I'm expecting major flooding through the Logan River through here, and again, there's some suburbs that are really at cause of concern right now, especially right on the Logan River as it bends through Logan City, expecting some significant flooding in these areas, and we could be seeing major flooding in these population centres as well. So I do imagine that there will be evacuation orders put in place around the Logan City area, so make sure you are tuning into the news agencies later on tonight. That's only on a worst case scenario if the rainfall actually does get really ugly over the next couple of hours. And again, like I said, at a worst case scenario, evacuation orders will be put into place across this part of Logan City. So I wouldn't bet the farm on it right now, but it is just a good thing to keep in the back of your mind. If you do live in the Logan City area and you're within about 200 metres of the Logan River, I'd strongly advise watching the radar and watching the river levels as well, about half an hour upstream around the Jimboomba area, watching those river levels, and once they get up towards the major flooding alerts, start preparing to evacuate just in case those water levels refuse to drop down. But if you haven't flooded by about midnight tonight, you should be for the most part okay. Definitely don't get complacent until early tomorrow morning when we're going to start to see those river levels drop, hopefully. But at this point here, it definitely is going to be quite a restless afternoon and a restless night for people in the Logan City area that are waiting out for some significant flooding possibilities in their locations. Down on the Gold Coast, there shouldn't be anything too significant or too crazy in the way of rainfall in the Tacoma and the Nerang rivers, and whilst significant rises are expected into some of the rivers upstream, especially into the Springbrook National Park throughout the remainder of today, we could be seeing some significant water level rises through there. I'm not sure why the map is being so funny, by the way, so don't pay any attention to the town names because they're all over the place, but around the Springbrook National Park and into the Hens Dam area, expecting some significant rises to the water levels through there. And then down into the northeast of New South Wales, rainfall accumulations shouldn't be enough to add to the flooding problems that they've got down there. But again, just to recap, a lot of rivers already at the minor flooding alerts in the southeast corner of Queensland. Even more rivers are now at the moderate flooding alerts as well, and with this rainfall still expected to pile on later on tonight, some really significant flooding problems and concerns are expected to unfold. And I need everybody to be remaining very vigilant through this time. Tropical Cyclone Alfred might have passed on, and it's inland around Chinchilla and Miles, and it's slowly dying off there and being pulled apart by wind shear. But the rainfall threat is still very much there across southeast Queensland, and it isn't going away anytime soon either. So stay vigilant, keep watching the radar, and keep watching the flood levels as well, especially if you live in a flood-prone area. The Bureau of Meteorology and the State Emergency Services will have the latest advice on this system as well, so make sure you're staying on top of their websites as well, checking back in every couple of minutes as well, and making sure that there's nothing new in terms of evacuation orders or notices. I strongly doubt that you'll have to evacuate around the Ipswich area, just because if there was a need to evacuate, we've known that this amount of rainfall is going to be coming in for a long period of time, or at least I've known that this rainfall is going to be coming in for a long period period of time. That I'd imagine that there would be evacuation notices already in place, but around the Ipswich area and the Logan City area, through the Bremer River and the Logan River, I think it's a very good time now to remain very vigilant and very much aware of what the river levels are doing about half an hour upstream of you, and having that evacuation plan in place, what you're going to be doing, where you're going to be going, and making sure that you can do so in a cool, calm, and collected manner as well. It's much better to be prepared than it is to be sorry. And again, if you do live in that flood-prone area and you do start to see the water levels rise up to your house, if it's flooded, forget it, and make sure that you do keep that in the front of your head through this event here. But that is all from me this afternoon. A special shout out, of course, to the channel sponsors. Their names are on screen right now, and again, I could not run the show without them. That'll be all for me today, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Stay safe.